The initial reception the Tuskegee Airmen received in the community where they were stationed sadly manifested the prejudice that they had experienced all too often during the war. The 332nd Fighter Group settled in at Lockbourne Air Force Base outside of Columbus, Ohio. Colonel Davis considered this a milestone because it represented the first time blacks had administered an air base in the continental United States without the immediate supervision of white officers. In fact, the mostly white civilian workers at the base had to adjust to the new command structure, and after a break-in period, they got along just fine. Davis would praise their commitment, writing that they joined us in a spirit of mission accomplishment. But in an echo of the howls of protest that had greeted the first black airfields around Tuskegee, a Central Ohio newspaper editorialized against locating the all-black unit at the base, stating that this is still a white man's country. The group's pilots were accustomed to such hostility, and though they did not like it, they went about their flying as they always did, with diligence and eagerness, in case the order came to spring into action. Top elected officials from the state and city, as well as leading citizens from the community, toured the base and ultimately came to view Lockbourne as their base. More slowly, Lockbourne became understood as a major asset in the minds of all Columbus residents. Lockbourne made a mark in other ways, too. The group hosted track and field events that featured Staff Sergeant Mal Whitfield, a 1948 Olympic gold medalist assigned to the 100th Fighter Squadron. A special services officer in the group, who had to overcome initial skepticism on Davis's part, organized a traveling entertainment ensemble under the name Operation Enjoyment, subsequently called Operation Happiness. The performances were a hit at Air Force installations around the globe and featured Daniel "Chappie" James, Jr., later to become the first four-star African-American general in the U.S. military. The group was part of Tactical Air Command, TAC, and its mission was focused largely on protecting ground forces through close air support. TAC's commander, General Elwood R. Pete Quesada, was a notable proponent of air-land cooperation who had developed successful air-to-ground doctrine during World War II. The 332nd worked to keep its proficiency in peacetime through training missions that involved short stints at other bases around the country. On March 20th, 1948, Harry and four of his colleagues were at Greenville Air Force Base in South Carolina and anxious to get back to Lockbourne. The Flight of Five had been on an armed reconnaissance training mission in coordination with Army ground forces that was supposed to be a one-day exercise, but maintenance issues and foul weather had delayed them. Having completed the mission 2 days earlier, they were ready to go home. The morning's weather forecast called for some thunderstorms en route with multiple layers of clouds. Facing these less-than-ideal conditions, the flight leader, First Lieutenant Charles V. Brantley, filed an instrument flight plan with a cruising altitude of 18,000 feet, where he hoped the formation could skirt the worst of the weather and stay in clear skies to preserve the formation's integrity. In any case, the pilots were qualified on instruments and had flown through inclement weather before. They considered the coming flight as nothing out of the ordinary, just a routine hop. But the milk run would prove to be one of the most terrifying flights of Harry's Air Force career. Shortly after takeoff, he and his fellow pilots joined up in a 5-ship V formation with the flight leader up front and Harry trailing to starboard. In a few minutes, the pilots reached the planned altitude, where they seemed to find their sweet spot between cloud decks. They trekked on a northwest plot. They were flying late-model World War II holdovers, Republic P-47N fighters. The N model was the final production variant of the famed Thunderbolt, which in the earlier D configuration had distinguished itself in the war's European theater as both an effective dogfighter and a tough ground attack platform. The aircraft had an unusual genesis. Its seedling was the brainchild of Alexander de Seversky, a Russian engineer and naval fighter-bomber pilot in World War I, who lost a leg on his first combat mission but re-entered the fray with an artificial limb, ending his service as a 13 victory ace. Tsar Nicholas II personally